just me being recorded. Okay, so our usual start, and you know, it's chillier, so do take care. The tendency is always to sort of pull in on yourself, isn't it? So just account for that in the things that you do. So rubbing your hands together, and then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. And one shot. And your side. Chest. Belly. And your legs. Sit back and just let your attention settle back into your body. And it's just sort of spiraling in. You just notice generally how you feel. You feel your weight dropping back. Maybe the rhythm of your breathing. But then just zooming in, as it were, on finer and finer detail. You know, when you breathe, your breath is taken account of. Where do you feel the movement? Not trying to force anything on the body, but you know, the ribs or the belly or the shoulders or whatever, and so on and so forth. You know, when you sink into the chair, are there particular points contact with the chair where that happens through? Are the points where you're resisting that pull of gravity? And you're not trying to change anything at the moment. The first stage is always you get a sense of what is going on. And then you come to the upright position, and really, so in the background, there should always be this sense of the broader landscape. Remember, we're not trying to control the body with the mind. We're not trying to force the body into doing anything that it doesn't flow into, shall we say. So as we start to go a little bit further, beyond that simple observation stage, this is where the term cultivation comes in. We're trying to cultivate the postures, cultivate the movements and the approaches to Tai Chi, rather than trying to force your body to do them. I quite like this term cultivation. Like if you have a bush in your garden and you decide to go and prune it, you don't just go in and randomly cut things off or force it into a shape. First thing you would do is to look at it and think, well, where's the dead wood? Where do I want to cut it? That kind of thing. But in the same way, once again, just giving yourself a few moments in this posture, same process really. What changes have taken place? And beginning to form a picture, an intent of how you want to sort of move forward, as it were. And some of that is familiar stuff, hopefully. You've done this enough to sort of feel the taste of the postures and the movements, and simply allowing your body to find its way to them, because I think a lot of this becomes quite intuitive over a period of time. Breathing, alignment with the pull of gravity, or yielding to the pull of gravity, and then that sense of space that begins to occur, and beginning to move within that space, just turning your head as far as it's possible to turn without creating a tightening, a gripping feeling anywhere in your body. And in a sense, it's without judgment. It's not this is right or this is wrong, and certainly not well, this is how far I could move last week, and so on and so forth. Balance that against this idea that this is what you'd like to be able to do. We want to be able to progress. We want to be able to sort of improve things. And then the shoulders. Hands down by your sides, winding around. Try and keep that awareness. You know, where do you feel the effect of the movement? Raising your arms, so you're winding up the thread at some time. Back the other way. And then easing forwards, pushing back. One of the things that we want to keep as sort of part of that broader picture, as part of that intent, is that we want to move without that tightening, without having to force the body, without that gripping sensation. And it won't always work. And sometimes you'll find that your body will simply find a way to do it. And particularly those movements that you're particularly drawn to, familiar with, and particularly like other movements, other postures and so on, might need a little bit more analysis. You might think, well, maybe if I put my foot here or do this to my shoulder or something like that. And again, we want to find a balance between that. Turn a little. So gradually our sort of understanding, almost our relationship with the movements, takes on a different dimension. I've talked about this before, most of you, this idea of working from the inside out rather than from the outside in. So the external movement, what you might think of as the choreography, draw your attention inside your body, and then you build back up to almost rebuilding the movement from the inside out. The other direction. And it feels to me like there's no end to that process. It's an ongoing thing, because every time one thing changes, everything kind of shifts around. So movement stays very much alive in that sense. And then going around. and back the other way. And then come back to the center on your feet. On the other side. When I make this distinction between inner and outer, don't see it as a hard barrier. We're not separate from our environment and vice versa. There's a passage in the Yellow Emperor's text of Chinese medicine, which is a very ancient text, the root text of Chinese medicine, really, where it just says quite simply, says, you know, in the spring, there's lots of energy around. You get up early and you do lots of things, and you're active, and you go to bed quite late. You know, from an agricultural society, don't forget. And then in the summer, you get up early and you're quite active, and there's lots of things to do. Likewise in the autumn, but it slows down a little bit in the autumn. I'm paraphrasing. Then it says, well, in the winter, you get up late, you don't do very much, and you go to bed early. Which is a nice idea in some ways, isn't it? But it's more or less saying, you know, the season of changes affect us, and there's no reason to suppose that anything that we do, and that includes the Tai Chi practice, is going to be the same from one season to the next, or from one day to the next. So it's a never changing landscape in that sense, both inner and outer. We don't get stuck in any particular way of doing things, and that's where that initial assessment, what's going on today, becomes really important to us. So let your hands drop down, and then again rotating your arms and just transferring your weight at the same time. Again, just aware of areas that might possibly be a bit tight, a bit stuck, a bit painful. Lower back, shoulders tend to be areas that in the cold can stiffen up. And of course, you're making good use of all of those as we go into the main body of exercises. And always there's this underlying thing of you have a shape, shall we call it, in your mind, an idea or whatever, that you want your body to flow through. And that won't work all the time, but as I say, that's the first stage. And then we can get into sort of certain ways of analyzing and understanding and changing things, but not always necessary. And then fisherman cast a net. And then rolling the ball in. And pigeon spreads its wings. And then pushing away. And punch with both. Now, back to pigeon spreads its wings, and one of each of those last three in a little sequence. Then turning your hands out, moving on. If we start that process of moving from inner to outer, with the simpler movements, as we build up into slightly more complex movements, then some of that awareness will stay with us. It's quite hard to maintain that kind of awareness. And it's certainly the case that standard Tai Chi practice is that if you're in one of the sequences and it's quite complex and you can't quite work it out, you go back to simpler exercises to work out from first principles what's going on. So this is a common process in Tai Chi. And then polishing the table. Be aware of what's happening in the back of your body, lower back, hips, pelvis, when the spine goes into your pelvis. If the front of your body is going to the right, the back of your body is going to the left, remember. So when I've talked about these counter movements, these balancing movements, one of the things that they offer us is a chance of a perspective that is more of the whole body. You just recognize that it's not just all about what happens in the front of the body. It's not left or right, but these movements are actually circular around the center. Do one more. Bring your hands in, turn them palm up and pushing up. Press it down. Change into the water. Heart in the clouds. and then letting your hands drop down, changing. One more time. And then change. Turn. One more round of this. scooping the sea and looking at the sky. And then grasping the tiger's ears. Switch to the other side. And change. Bring that foot back and turn into part in the wild horse's mane. So just turn a little bit to your left, hold the ball with the right hand underneath, and you're going to head off towards that opposite foot. Just pressing down with the top hand and then coming back. Hold the ball, go across to the other side. Same thing on the opposite side. One of the interesting things when we get a more complex movement like this, especially when we're able to repeat it over and over again, is that there's quite a variety of things that we can focus on, that we can notice. And because it's repeating, you get a chance to try them again. You might do part in the wild horse's mane and think, oh, that's interesting, that's happening in my back or my side or whatever. And then you try it on the other side and you don't notice it. And then you go back to the side where you first noticed it, and maybe it's there, maybe it's not. There's a little bit of trial and error involved in all of these things. But gradually you sift through what actually, if you like, makes the pattern, the different movements, the turning, the extension, the contraction. And so there's a little bit more variety in this one than with some of the previous exercises. So you may notice something and think, well, is that it? But in a few moments, you'll get a chance to try again to refine that. So movements like this lend themselves very well to that cultivating process, I think. think this is the last one. And just rest. And even in resting, this is where we bring ourselves back to that very fine-tuned awareness. What is involved in the in-breath? What is involved in the out-breath? Are we able to really settle into the chair, sort of that upright posture, whatever else occurs? Okay, then once again, rubbing your hands together. And tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder. Your arm. Aside. Up off your chest. Belly. Use back on and your legs. Right, and then popping your feet, so pushing the ball of your foot down. So I'm sure you can see what I'm doing. You can see just that, very simple, but you'll feel it working up to your calf and knee into the thigh muscles. The main thing is to get the muscles moving a little bit as you do this. And then you hold the heel up, but go around in a little circle. See if you can feel that into your hip joint. You can go either way. There's direction if you want. And then on the other side, up and down first of all. And then circling in one direction. And back the other way. Good. Okay, and then stand. Feet hip width apart. And again, just feeling that you're able to let your weight go down through your body, feet sinking into the floor a little bit, weight a little bit forwards. Sink back and root it down. And then the wild goose. and part in the clouds. Shake out. 1 foot forwards. Raising your toes and your heel. Ankle can turn out slightly. That turning out of the front foot will open up the hip joint to create a bit of space for the weight to sink down. When we're only, excuse me, we're only going for 60% of the weight, that's not really necessary. Unless your hip's really stiff, you should be able to do that. But of course, we're gradually increasing weight now. The back foot is already turned out. That's why in the fixed step stance, we can get 70% of the weight back, so a little bit more of the weight into the back foot. And stepping in. Not everybody would need to do that. It depends on our hips, but I think generally speaking, the foot at an angle is a very common thing, but not too wide. You're still predominantly looking forwards. So beyond a certain point, I mean, if I was going to do something like, say, this, I thought, well, turned out. Actually, what would happen now is I would turn. And that's not the idea. And then your other foot forwards. So here, toe front toes point straight forwards. Only 60% of your weight is going into the foot. 70% into the back at most at this point. And then raising toes and heel. And stepping in. And step through. Change direction. Okay. So have your right foot forward. Start with fisherman cast the net. As you go back this time, switch to wind blows the willows. So you go into your back leg, but turn towards the front leg. And if it's comfortable for you, just step in. It is quite tricky because with your arms out and you're turning, you won't always quite get the route. But again, don't think that's an absolute failure. That awareness that you're breathing may give you a few clues as to how to approach that. And then on the other side. When I try those sort of exercises, I find that a very crucial element is the degree of focus that I can bring to what's happening in the foot that I'm standing on. It's as though I have to anchor my attention in the sole of my foot. When I can do that, then that doesn't guarantee anything, but without that, it's as though nothing else will actually work. Once more. And then wind blows the willow. And again, if appropriate, stepping in. Excellent. So go back to your chair. Once again, just letting yourself settle into the chair, finding a good posture, a good position. Your hands drop down. And this takes us back to that quiet overall awareness. It's like, you know, from the top of the mountain, you can look out over the landscape, sort of thing. And it may be that there are changes that you notice from the start of the class. Even if you don't notice them, doesn't mean they haven't happened, but sometimes things stick out. There may be that tight spot is eased, or maybe something's tightened up. All sorts of things can change. But then just sort of step back from that, as it were, to that broader perspective. Do this one more time. Coming to rest, and once again, just aware of your weight, settling, the rhythm of your breathing, the actions of your breathing, which parts of your body are involved in that. That sense of just being able to sit upright without having to stiffen up, tighten up. Just sitting quietly for a few moments. And just open your eyes. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Useful.